Mr. Askola, welcome to the Euronews program.
Thank you. Greetings from Finland.
Finland is the NATO member with the longest border with Russia, but while the collective defense system protects the country from conventional attack, it does not protect it from hybrid warfare. How many such operations were registered in the last 2.5 years?
Thank you. That's a great question. Russian hybrid operations have been very active in Finland during the full-scale war, but they already started way before that. We cannot give a definite number or exact number in the exact number of operations, but there are a few key incidents that are suspected of being Russian hybrid operations that I will cite, and that maybe you had in the video before already, but there's the GPS jamming, and then maybe the biggest has been this pipeline that was destroyed a year ago between Finland and Estonia, and also the underwater cables that were destroyed recently. Those were cooperations between China and Russia in terms of the hybrid operation. But then there has also been the migrant crisis where Russia has been pushing migrants on our border like they did in 2015 and they did again during the full-scale invasion until we shut the border down. And then our key infrastructure has been broken into several times. Drones have been flying over them. And then finally, the cyber attacks have increased as well. So there has been a very high number of hybrid operations, but we don't have a definite exact number. And with these hybrid operations, what is difficult is if you ignore them, then you kind of give a win to Russia and let them push further. But at the same time, if you make too much noise out of them, then you also give them a win and scare the population. So the government needs to find a sort of right balance between ignoring and making too much noise out of them. And the Finnish authorities have been ready for this and they have done well. So to conclude, we don't have a definite number, but there has been many. And so far, Russia has failed at reaching its goals with them, but we'll see how it goes in the future.
Since the beginning of the conflict in Ukraine, the Baltic has become, so to say, a hot region of hybrid warfare. You have mentioned several examples, but how dangerous is it that Russia is considering sending a nuclear arsenal towards the border with Finland and into the Kaliningrad region?
Great question again. Thank you. The Baltics has indeed become a very hot zone, as you said, but the fact that Russia is moving its nuclear arsenal and threatening with nuclear weapons is actually a sign of Russian weakness more than a sign of Russian strength, in the sense that Russia used to have very strong conventional capabilities on our border, and because they are overstretched in Ukraine, they are not capable of doing that anymore. So they are trying to compensate the lack of troops with these nuclear threats and the nuclear arsenal being moved around. At the end of the day, it doesn't change our security situation in Finland at all, because Russian nuclear-capable missiles have had the range to reach us from further away than our border for a long time. And Russia could shoot them from Moscow, Kazan, or anywhere and reach us. So they don't need to actually be at the border to touch us. And as our ex-head of military intelligence said, it's actually easier for us to target them if they are at our border. So at the end of the day, this is very different from the hybrid operations that we discussed in the first question, where you have to find the right balance with hybrid operations between ignoring them and making too much noise with them. In the case of these nuclear threats and nuclear arsenal being moved around, it's better to just ignore it. So to sum it up, it's a sign of Russian weakness. The Baltic zone has become a very hot zone, as you said, but it's not a sign of Russian strength that Russia has to move around the nuclear arsenal, and it's better to ignore it because it only gives power to Russia if we don't.
In addition to membership in NATO, Finland will, based on the bilateral agreement, allow U.S. troops to use several military bases in the country, airports and ports. But the U.S. will not open its own military base in Finland. Are they a sufficient deterrent for Moscow?
That is very convenient for us to have U.S. troops train with us and for them also to learn winter capabilities with the Finnish forces, but also because that forces the U.S. to also keep some equipment in Finland. And as we have seen with Ukraine, having equipment, even you can never have too much of it, and having some extra equipment is good. But overall, Finland, in its history, has survived without being in NATO for most of its history. And the fact that we're in NATO now is nice and it's a good addition. But Finnish deterrence and Finnish defense is not based on its alliances. The alliances are more like a bonus or plus. So if we can increase our defense capabilities and deterrence thanks to them, we're more than happy about it. But our deterrence is still based on our own capabilities. Finland has a reserve of 870,000 men and a wartime force of 280,000 men. We have the biggest artillery in the European Union. We have bomb shelters for everyone, every civilian. and we also have a very complex nature to attack, and our infrastructure is ready for war. And then finally, also with the polls, when asking people if they're ready to defend their motherland, Finnish people score the highest in Europe in most of those polls. So Finland is not an easy place to invade, and Russia knows this. And it's thanks to our own defense more than our alliances, even if the alliances are a big plus. Today, the White Defense paper was actually published. That gets published around once every 4 years, the defense policy paper. It got published maybe 30 minutes ago or so I haven't had a time to read it yet, but I'm sure they will say that the Finnish capabilities will be based on our own capabilities, even in the 2030s and in the future. So to conclude on this question, the US presence in Finland is a big plus for us, and it gives us the access to some equipment and so on. But overall, we base our deterrent and our defense on ourselves, and the alliances and partnerships that we have are just a great bonus to make the deterrence even stronger.
Mr. Ascola, many thanks for joining us here in the Euronews program.